World of Warcraft is attempting to tackle a cursed problem in game design. Now, these are problems that are intractable because they have competing interests that do not align with each other. The problem that Blizzard is trying to tackle is how do you have a game with an extremely high skill ceiling for experienced players and be approachable to new players? Blizzard is currently trying to solve this problem with the one-button assist feature. And the wild thing is that it kind of works. So this is a feature that was introduced in the most recent patch, and it's essentially a tool that's available to players that is a single button that changes attack abilities based on a variety of factors, but ultimately does a simple version of your DPS rotation for you. It can never be optimal because there is a penalty associated with using the one-button assist tool in the terms of that there is a global cooldown limiter where it makes it so the time between each of your abilities used is extended by a few fractions of a second. And there are some positives and there are some negatives to it, but ultimately it can easily become a crutch. And if you haven't been using your rotation for 30 hours and suddenly you've hit a piece of content that requires it, you're kind of going to be 30 hours behind on practice. So let's kind of dive into it and talk a bit more about it. So I have honestly been loving using this tool. It has been really awesome in playing alts this season. With the introduction of the Dragonflight talent system, a lot of the classes have felt very much like a Rube Goldberg machine, Rube Goldberg class design. And what I mean by that is there's some ability that causes a proc or an ability to trigger that causes another ability to be used, that causes another ability to be used. And it's kind of this Rube Goldberg machine where there's this domino effect of different abilities that you have to use. And I think that it feels a lot like a fighting game or an action game that has kind of this combo system associated with it. And with these combos, it's really fun to execute the combos. Like once you learn them, it feels lit. Like there's a combo in Farseer Restoration Shaman where you put a hot on a player, and then if you cast Chain Heal on that player, the Chain Heal is juiced and just does an insane amount of healing. So you can execute this combo where you set up a hot on someone, and then 5-10 seconds later, you pop that hot to do a huge amount of healing, and that can be really satisfying and rewarding. And it offers that really high skill ceiling for experienced players, but man, it is so daunting to load into a character that's, level 70, and you just see this, an essay of abilities. There's, 30-something tooltips, and it's really overwhelming. The one-button assist feature just lets you say, give me the starter build. I don't really care. And put the one button on my bar, and I'm just kind of going to vibe. I'm just going to chill. I'm going to blast some enemies, and it's going to be awesome. And I'm not going to be optimal. I know I'm not going to be optimal, but I don't really care. I just want to level. I just want to have the feeling of playing a Frost Mage. I want that feeling of I'm dropping these, glacial spikes and frozen things down, and I don't have to be optimal to do a follower dungeon, but I also feel extremely overwhelmed trying to do anything when I'm like, well, this button's glowing. I don't know what to do. Do I cast Frostbolt here? This dungeon's taking forever. I don't know. And I don't want to open up and read 20 different tooltips. And so this is giving a stepping stone to just start playing the game and enjoying the game. One of the other pros is that improving your gear is kind of the only way to improve your damage with this. And I say that that's a pro because gear is so important in modern World of Warcraft. I think that there's kind of a tuning where you get 1% power level from each item level that your character attains. But that's kind of not the whole story. 1% feels really small, but that's increased stamina. That's reducing the amount of damage you take if you have the versatility stat. And, increasing increasing your power level by 1%, it's multiplicative on the previous 1%. So 1% on top of the previous 1% is like 1.01% or something like that, right? So it can kind of get this exponential amount of damage improvement or performance improvement. And being able to understand that and understand the importance of gear in this game is an important tool to learn, but some of the gearing systems, while once you understand them are rewarding, does take a bit of time to understand what's going on and how to use them. And this allows players to kind of focus on that aspect of the game and understand that before they start getting overwhelmed with all the abilities that they have to use. The other thing that's a good thing is the rotational expertise is still there. I still really enjoy going into dungeons or going into raids and going through my elemental shaman DPS rotation. It feels good. I know that I'm dealing significantly more damage. I'll talk about it later as to some of the differences that I saw in our raid last week. And I'm willing to I want to do it manually. I'm not opting to play an easier version of the rotation, the one button, because I feel rewarded for playing well, and there's a depth there, and there's still things to improve on. And that's the level that I'm at right now. I understand the gear system, I understand the content, and this keeps that interest still available to me as kind of a mastery section of the game. Another thing that's really nice about it is that it's makes understanding and learning new content significantly easier. So what do I mean by that? When you go into a new mythic dungeon and you might be playing a new spec or a new role for the season because you heard Devastation Evoker is awesome this season, and so I'm going to play that. And you go in and you're trying to do your DPS rotation, and you're also in Operation Floodgate, and there's so many different abilities that are flying at you. You're learning the content and you're learning the rotation. It's too overwhelming. And I notice it as a veteran player, and I can imagine that if you're an entry level player, you are equally as confused, and it's just way too much too fast. And so this gives you an opportunity to understand and learn the content, and then taking off that one button assist and using that as, okay, now this is where I show my mastery of the content. This is when I'll get to a point where I need to manually go through my rotation, but while I'm trying to understand what these boss abilities do, I can do that through playing the game as opposed to going to watch a YouTube video or going to read a Wowhead guide or something along those lines. I can learn through playing the game, and that is so powerful. I cannot express how important it is to be able to learn through playing the game, doing the content that everyone else is. And this one button assist allows you to do that, and it's so friggin' sweet. It's so cool that this is just an option that's available. The next thing that I think it does a great job at is it kind of unlocks controller support. It really brings down that barrier of entry of, I now have to learn, I'm level 70, I want to try playing with a controller, and you load in and you have 70 abilities on your bar, and you're like, I need to map these to controller buttons with the modifiers, and it's just way too much. You will load it up. I had my friend over last weekend, and we loaded up console port on his Steam Deck, and we just went, this is kind of a lot. Maybe I'm not good enough for this. And it limits the amount of scope that you have to learn. So this is kind of the next point I'm getting at, is that, this allows something I might call it a mental accessibility for different pieces of content. But going back to the controller support, being able to map a single button, and then, if you're using Steam overlay, you can use the turbo button to just kind of have to hold it down as opposed to having to mash a single button for 10 minutes or so. That's really fun. it's really fun to be able to sit back, do a leveling delve. You're on your controller and you're just vibing. I just want to get the thing. I just want to do the thing. I want to let this world wash over me. I can focus on using my defensive abilities. I can focus on using interrupts because there's a lot less of those buttons than my DPS rotation. And that's just nice. We were playing WoW on our television because we could play on the Steam Deck using our controller, and it just felt so chill and good. And it's, there's content that's there for people that want to be really good, but like when you just want to play a game with your bud, WoW offers that opportunity for you now that your friend doesn't have to be an expert in World of Warcraft to just get into the game, and that's awesome. I was talking about mental accessibility. Now, one of the biggest issues with WoW right now is, or not biggest issues, but I would say there are a few different skill testing pieces in World of Warcraft. And right now, I think that is juggling multiple pieces of information and cognitive load at the same time. So if I look at a high-level Mythic Plus dungeon, I have to do my DPS rotation. In addition to that, I have to be managing my big offensive cooldowns based off of the pack. I'm doing that mental planning, thinking ahead to the dungeon. I also might have to be doing some kind of interrupts or, crowd control rotation on the enemies. So I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about, okay, an ability is coming. I need to use a defensive. If this enemy is targeting me, do I need to use a defensive there? I'm thinking about the timer. Do we have to modify our route to try and complete the dungeon on time? I'm thinking about whether or not I need to respond to a damage event with a healing potion. I'm thinking about the route that we're taking. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. And when you listen to how high-level players say how to get good at WoW, they say, oh, offload this to an add-on. That's why Weak Warriors are so popular, is that they offload a lot of the cognitive load of doing your rotation and condense all that information so that you can press the right button at the right time without having to think about it so hard. You don't have to rederive the answer every single time. And those weak auras work for your defensives. When an ability is coming out that you're going to need to use a defensive on, there are add-ons that will tell you, use a defensive here. It will just say defensive. There are text-to-speech add-ons and weak auras that do all that. And the level of cognitive load that is now offloaded to an add-on that a player has, a regular player doesn't have those add-ons, is insane. And that can lead to this high disparity of skill ceiling, high disparity of skill. And this tool allows you to kind of bring that mental accessibility of giving you something that you don't have to pay attention to. You don't have to pay attention to your DPS rotation, and you can focus on those other things that honestly have a higher impact on the success of your key. If you're doing your mechanics and you live, you're going to have a higher chance of succeeding that key. I haven't done a single key this season that we failed because we did not have enough damage. The only times we've ever failed keys is because we did not do the mechanic or did the mechanic incorrectly and either wiped or had one person just wipe constantly over and over and over again. And if the players in our group had been focusing more on the content and focusing more on doing the mechanics of the content and less focused about damage, at least at these key levels, we would have succeeded. We would have won. And this allows you to kind of take that mental accessibility and reduce it to something that is manageable for normal people. I noticed that kind of an application of this is last week during our raids, we're working on One Arm Bandit, and this is we're pulling it, and we're like 40 pulls in or something like that. And I am using the rotation assist, or the one button assist, outside of the DPS burst windows. So I will use Ascendance. I will go manual mode on my Ascendance, which is the big damage for Elemental Shamans this season. And then outside of that, I'm just doing raid callouts. I'm saying, we have one person in our in our team that's saying when we need to bait, what coins we need to go, and then I'm calling out, okay, the range have to be on this one, the melee are on this one, and kind of organizing. And my mental capacity is much higher to see around the battlefield. I'm paying less attention to the weak auras that are going so that I'm pressing the right buttons to do the highest amount of damage, and I'm paying more attention to, are we doing the right strategy? Where are we making mistakes? What's happening? How are we pressing the pylon at the right time? There's a lot more reasonable cognitive load that can be placed on a raid leader to understand in the moment where the problems are occurring. I noticed that we would get to a wipe and I wouldn't even have to look at logs. I knew exactly what the problems were. I could see it just through by taking the cognitive load of not having to do the by not having to pay attention to my weak auras and all that stuff, and to help me figure out my rotation. I could just say like, oh, I know that I know exactly who dropped the puddle in the wrong location. I can just see it. Whereas with other time, with like the last week, I would be doing my DPS rotation. I would see a puddle is dropped. I would have no idea who dropped it. And this tool is a tool. That's what it is. It could be a play style, but ultimately for high level play, it can be a tool to make it so that you can learn and understand what's going on in a way that didn't exist before in WoW. And I think that's why it's so cool. Let's see. I think I had one more thing. Maybe I'll think about it when I'm on the cons, but for some of the cons, I think that highly skilled players can feel like this will invalidate the investment that they've put into their skills. And what I mean by that is there's an investment in that you have to do right now, where you have to go into your UI, you have to make all the different adjustments. You have to move your buffs to the right spot, you have to understand what is important, you have to read all the tooltips. And that's a fun process. I love the fact that that's still there. But if you can do the hardest content in the game or get a top 1% title by just pressing the one button, what's the point? What's the point in me investing in my UI or getting good at doing the rotation? There is a sensory feeling to it that's really good, but it invalidates that investment. And so I think that there is there's a content problem that this creates. And I think that they can solve this. During this tier, they had a boss called Rick Reverb. And for that boss, there is a mid-boss DPS check. And what that meant was we had to hold off on shorter or longer DPS cooldowns to line up at specific points when these barrels spawned, so that we had the most damage during the barrel spawns. And if you fail the barrel spawn, the raid just wipes. The raid is dead. And this is using your DPS abilities to solve a mechanic. And if you are just using the one button rotation and your brain is turned off and you're not doing anything else, you're not going to be able to beat that boss. And we had a lot of problems with beating that boss because a lot of our players weren't manipulating their cooldowns. But once we started to do that, it was much easier for us to beat those mid-boss DPS checks out when it's outside of our big cooldowns like Bloodlust. And so creating content that requires you to that cannot be beaten with the one button rotation, I think is going to be critical. I think it's going to be critical. I also think that it doesn't, when you're using the one button rotation, there is a level of sensory feedback or it's called game juice, that when you press the buttons in the right order and you've made that decision, it just feels good, man. It just feels really good. Right now for Ellie Shaman, there is a combo of abilities where if you cast a nature damage and a fire damage spell after using the ability Ice Fury, it will shoot out one of your big spender abilities. And there is a combo you can do where if you have one of these used and so you're waiting for you to spend the nature or the fire, and then you cast this ability called Elemental Blast, and then you cast Ice Fury immediately after. It triggers 3 of those Elemental Blasts to fire off all at the same time, and that feels so good. Like, my brain gets little tingles every time I hit that combo, and it's dope. And you just don't get that when you're playing the one button. It just doesn't feel as good. But you can easily move to the rotation assist where you're manually pressing the buttons, and you start to get that. You start to get a little bit of that back, and it feels good, and it's awesome. And that is a path that is available to players where you can just start playing the game, and you can move to the rotation assist off of the one button. And then you can move to manually assigning yourself. And then you can move to just using weak auras and this UI that you've invested in, because you're going to get closer and closer to optimal. The rotation assist is not optimal. The one button is far from, can never be optimal because of how it's designed. And just manually being able to do it is always going to be the best. I think that you can use the one button as a tool for learning stuff, but eventually you will need to use the if the content is designed well enough, you will need to use your brain, and manually controlling your character will be required. But it doesn't need to be required for everything, and it doesn't need to be required when you're just trying to, level up your alts and stuff like that. Yeah. So I'll be honest with you, I'm just really excited about this feature. You can probably tell I've been yapping for, so many minutes now about it, and I'm just so excited. It's so cool. It's such an interesting thing to add. I think the fact that it leaves the skill ceiling as high as it is for people that want to chase that and want to get better, that lane for improvement is there. But it leaves it at a place for someone that's newer to be able to get in and just play the game without being overwhelmed. And that's just so cool. So, I'm thinking about this and how us as veteran players can use to apply this. Using it during your filler rotation, outside of your burst window, that can be I found that I've had a lot of success doing that, especially while learning the content. And I'd love to hear if you guys have any other, kind of outside of the examples that I've listed here of different ways that you have been able to use the one button assist, or have you started to lean on the rotational assist buttons? How are you feeling about these kind of really cool accessibility features that they're adding? I'd love to hear about it. And obviously I'm a stan here. I'm biased towards it, and I'm just really looking forward to more World of Warcraft, man. Anyway, this is Para. I've been playing WoW for a long time, and I think I'm still going to keep doing it. So have a great day, y'all.